They told me it was an honor. That family came first. But that day, lying in the hospital bed, I realized I had just been used like a spare part. Everything was too white, too still. The walls buzzed faintly under fluorescent light, and I could hear the beeping of the heart monitor as if it belonged to someone else. My body felt hollow, as though something sacred had been scooped out of me, and it had. I tried to sit up, but pain screamed down my side. I gasped and dropped back against the stiff pillow, blinking at the ceiling tiles. My throat was dry, coated in silence. There were no flowers, no balloons, no cards, not even the cheap get-well-soon kind from Walgreens. But more than that, there was no one. They weren't here. Not my mother, not my father, certainly not Vanessa. I closed my eyes and let that sink in. If you don't sacrifice for blood, what's the point of Family Mom's voice years ago over the clatter of dishes? I must have been 13. I'd just asked why she always let Vanessa have the last slice of cake. She hadn't looked up when she said it hadn't needed to. That line had been tattooed on our family's bones long before I was born. Now it echoed in my head, bouncing between the sterile walls. I turned my head slowly. The side table held a plastic pitcher of water and a clipboard with my name on it. Natalie Crowley, 29 years old, donor. That word stared back at me, printed in bold. Not daughter, not sister, just donor. The room spun slightly, the medication fog still hanging over me. I remembered the day they told me. It was 4 weeks ago. In this very hospital. Bile duct failure, liver transplant needed, time was running out. Vanessa's. Not mine. I'd said no. At first. And they'd stared at me like I'd confessed to murder. "We're not asking you to die," Deborah had said, her voice calm, practiced. "Just to do what any loving sister would. And if I don't," I had asked already, knowing the answer. "Then you'll watch her die," she replied flatly, "and we'll all know who to blame." The pressure came fast and quiet after that. Daily calls, long voicemails, Dad's silence, Vanessa crying on cue, talking about second chances and redemption. Even Merrick, our usually mute father, had shown up once, eyes empty, voice low, telling me it was time to do the right thing. And then there was Dr. Langley pushing paperwork toward me in the cold consultation room. "Of course the donation must be voluntary," he'd said, voice like sandpaper. "But you do understand the urgency. You are her only match." I remember staring at the pen in my hand, wondering if my signature meant love or surrender. When I woke up from the surgery, I expected a hand to hold. A whisper of gratitude. Even Vanessa's fake tears. Anything. Instead, silence. A nurse had come in briefly to check my vitals. She smiled awkwardly when I asked if my family was here. "They stepped out," she said, like they'd only gone for coffee. But no one came back. Now, hours later, it was just me and the slow tick of the IV drip. Then the door creaked open, and there she was. Deborah. No flowers. No smile. She walked in like it was any Tuesday, looked me up and down as if inspecting furniture. Vanessa wasn't with her. "How's she doing?" I asked, voice barely audible. "She's resting." "Transplant was successful," Deborah said, eyes not meeting mine. I nodded. A small relief despite everything. "I thought you'd stay." "Just a little while," I said. She frowned. "You're done now. Focus on recovery. No hug. No thank you." Just that. She turned to leave before I could respond. And just like that, she was gone. I lay there, chest tight, swallowing something sharp. When the nurse returned with a tray of bland broth and pills, I asked for my discharge papers. "Oh, they're already processed. Dr. Langley filed them," she said. "We just need your signature later." "Can I have a copy?" I asked. She looked confused. "There isn't one here, actually. Might have gone with the originals. You can ask administration, but sometimes they don't make duplicates unless you request ahead." I stared at her cold, crawling up my spine. They had processed everything. Without me. Without giving me a voice. Again. 2 weeks after giving away a piece of my body, I was given a one-way bus ticket. Not even a ride home. The bus hissed and pulled away from the hospital curb, leaving behind the sterile white fortress where I'd nearly died giving life to someone else. I stood there a moment longer than necessary, fingers frozen around the flimsy paper ticket, the March drizzle needling into my scalp. I hadn't been told what to expect after discharge, but I had assumed something. A ride, a meal, a word of thanks. Instead, I was handed an envelope and pointed toward the terminal. That was all. The Greyhound ride from Riverford to Joliet was 3 hours of silence, motion sickness, and bone-deep exhaustion. I stared out the window at gray field strip malls and the endless churn of wet pavement. At some point, I realized I was still wearing the same shoes I'd entered surgery in, blood-crusted laces. Nobody had bothered to change them. When I finally reached Joliet, the cold wind slapped me fully awake. It was near midnight. No one had come to pick me up. I called Chloe. She answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" she asked, voice taut. "Depot station," I said. "South side. I'm coming." She replied. No hesitation. 10 minutes. Don't move. When her car pulled up, a dented blue Subaru with a sagging bumper, I nearly cried. "You look like a ghost," she muttered, bundling me into the passenger seat. "Why didn't you call sooner?" I didn't answer. I was too busy holding myself together. Chloe drove me to her apartment. It smelled like cinnamon and cats. She made tea, wrapped me in a blanket, and didn't press for details. But the next morning, as I sat at her kitchen table trying to make sense of the discharge folder, she finally asked, "Did they explain any of this? Like in detail? Are you sure everything they did was legal?" I looked up. "What do you mean?" She flipped one of the documents around. "This authorization letter, there's no original signature. Just a photocopy with your N." My heart started pounding. I flipped through the rest of the folder. The discharge notes were vague. No attending doctor listed. The authorization form had no date of signature. The notary section was blank. "I was awake when I signed it," I said slowly. "I think. Maybe not fully. But they were pushing hard." Chloe leaned back. "You're telling me you were sedated when you signed? I don't remember." "That's not good," she muttered. I turned to the last page. A note from Deborah. Handwritten. "You've done your part. This family has nothing left for you. No greeting. No signature. Just that." I felt something snap in my chest, not with a bang, but a soft, clean break. A quiet goodbye disguised as dismissal. I stood up and went to the fridge. Taped there, still curling at the edges, was an old photo of my family. Christmas 2019. All of us in matching pajamas. I pulled out my phone and opened Mom's Facebook page. New post. 3 days ago. Same couch. Same pose. Same pajamas. Minus one person. Me. They'd taken another Christmas photo. Recreated the exact shot but edited me out. As if I'd never existed. I stared at it. My breath caught. That's when I opened the lab report again. I hadn't looked too closely at the blood work, most of it was medical jargon. But now I noticed something odd. My blood type was listed as O+. Vanessa's, I remembered from years ago, was AB. I blinked. That wasn't right. Livers aren't universal. They have to match certain factors. O+ and AB aren't compatible for direct donation. It should have been flagged, denied, reviewed. My hand started to shake as I reread the document. If my liver wasn't a match, why did they say it was? And what else were they hiding? Vanessa once called me adopted trash during a fight over a broken vase. I was 12. She was 16 and seething. At the time, I thought it was just another cruel jab, one of many. But now that phrase landed differently, like a grenade belatedly going off in the hollow space behind my ribs. It was raining again when I arrived at Riverford General. The same rain as the day they took my liver. The same gray sky. I pulled the hoodie lower over my face and clutched Chloe's borrowed clipboard like it was armor. The records department was tucked behind a series of flickering corridors that smelled like antiseptic and sadness. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. A single receptionist looked up bored. I handed her the outdated authorization form Chloe had helped forge. Dr. Miles requested the old donor registry, I said, trying to sound clipped and indifferent. Audit request. She barely looked at it, just waved me toward the back. The archives were a room of metal drawers and dust. I scanned the cabinets, heart pounding. Organ donations, 2023 was in the third row. I yanked it open and rifled through until I found the file labeled Vanessa Lang, liver transplant, March 2023. I expected to see my name on the donor line, but it wasn't there. Instead, the original match listed was someone named Anthony Greer, age 45, deceased DOD March 9th. My blood froze. The file had my name handwritten in the margin, different pen, different ink, dated 3 days later. They switched the donor. After Vanessa's surgery was already scheduled. After Anthony died. The pieces didn't fit, unless they forced a new donor. Me. Behind me, the door creaked slightly. I turned instinctively, no one there, except a flash of movement. Blonde hair. Tall. It looked like her. Vanessa. I froze, then blinked, but whoever it was had vanished down the hall. Back at Chloe's apartment, I dropped the file on her kitchen table. Jesus, she muttered. This is not just unethical, it's criminal. I think they faked the match. She nodded slowly. We'll need proof. More than just altered files. DNA would do it. I stared at her. Chloe hesitated, then leaned in. Let's run a test. Quietly. I know a lab. My hands trembled slightly as I nodded. Do it. Later that week, I returned to the hospital under a new pretense patient advocate follow-up. I lingered near the nurses' station, pretending to review charts. One of the older nurses, Karen, walked by with a coffee cup that looked older than she was. Her face softened when she saw me. You're Natalie, right? She asked low. I stiffened. Yes. She looked around, then leaned in, whispering, You weren't the only one forced. What? But she was already walking away as if the words had never been spoken. The email came that night. No subject, no sender, just one line in the body. She didn't sign her name, but she sent 3 files, and one of them made my blood run cold. The rain had turned relentless by the time Chloe and I stepped into the basement cafe tucked behind an old bookstore. The kind of place with peeling wallpaper, dusty booths, and a flickering light over the register. It was perfect for being invisible. Chloe opened her laptop the moment we slid into a back booth. She was wearing that look again, half skepticism, half lawyer on a mission. Still can't trace the sender. It's a dead-end address routed through 3 proxies, but the files came through clean. There were 3 zip files attached. No message, no sender name. Just, I know what they did to you. I have proof. T. She clicked on the first. Audio 001, MP3. We sat frozen as a tinny recording began. At first, just static. Then a voice, faint but unmistakably Deborah. Delete the underlying diagnosis. I don't care what the chart says. Make it go away. A second voice, softer, nervous. But that changes her transplant eligibility. I said, make it go away. If you want to keep your job. Chloe paused the playback. Her eyes met mine, wide with disbelief. Did your mom did she actually say that out loud? I nodded, but my jaw had locked. The second voice sounded familiar in a way I couldn't quite place. We moved on to the second file. PDF, redacted forms.pdf. It was a scan of several hospital records sloppily redacted with black marker. Dates, medications, even blood type info blurred beyond recognition, but one signature leapt off the page. Tasha Reynolds. My stomach turned. The name didn't ring a bell until Chloe pulled up an old staff directory photo from Riverford General 2017. A woman in her late 30s, pale eyes, dark ponytail, standing on the far right of the nursing staff photo, half out of frame. Her smile looked like it had been pasted on under duress. "You remember her?" Chloe asked. I shook my head. "No, but I think she remembers me." The third file was smaller, just a text document with one line: "Check your birth certificate. Then check your blood type." We both stared at it. "Want me to message her?" Chloe asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She typed quickly. Within 10 minutes, a reply came, anonymous but clearly her. "Tasha, I'm taking a risk sending this." Chloe: "Why now, Tasha?" "Because your mother made me fake a report, and because she hurt others. You're not alone." I leaned over. "Ask her what she means." "What report?" Tasha replied. "She told me to change Vanessa's medical record. Said if the system saw her full history, she'd never qualify for a transplant." I altered the chart. "I still have the original." Chloe whistled under her breath. "That's felony-grade falsification." I tried to breathe through the nausea twisting in my gut. "Ask her about me." Chloe hesitated, then typed, "What about Natalie?" Tasha's answer took longer. "Tasha, I don't know everything, but I overheard something once. Your mom said she's not even ours. I thought she meant metaphorically, but now, you should test your DNA." I stared at the screen. The words pulsed in my head like an alarm I couldn't shut off. Chloe placed a hand over mine. "I know a lab. Private. Discreet." I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. That night, I registered under a fake name and paid extra for express delivery. The swab kit arrived within 36 hours. I followed the instructions like a robot, sealed the envelope, and dropped it in a blue USPS box at midnight, standing alone in the drizzle. My heart thudded like a ticking time bomb. The results came back 3 days later, preliminary but clear enough. Maternal relation. No match found. I froze. The line blurred. I blinked, reread. It blinked again. No match. Not even partial. My mouth went dry. I wasn't her daughter. And if Deborah wasn't my mother, then who was I? I wasn't just an afterthought. I was a cover-up. The words wouldn't stop circling my mind, no matter how many times I whispered, "You're okay. You're okay." I wasn't. Not by a mile. The DNA results sat open on Chloe's desk, flanked by yellow sticky notes, printed emails, and grainy photos of hospital records. She had turned her living room into a war room, literally. A corkboard leaned against the wall with string connecting red-marked items. My birth certificate was pinned dead center, a highlighter marking the font of the issuing county's seal. "You see this?" Chloe tapped the upper corner of the certificate. "This serif font didn't come into standard use until 2002. Yours is dated 1994. So, it's fake. It's doctored, at the very least." I sank onto her couch, staring at the ceiling like it might provide answers. I thought about all the birthdays where Deborah forgot the cake. The time she donated my Christmas gifts to church because I didn't earn them. The journal I kept in middle school that she read without asking, and then burned when she found a single line about hating her. I had been 12. Vanessa was 16 and had just broken my Walkman out of spite. I wrote, "Sometimes I think I'm not really one of them." The next morning, the pages were ash in the kitchen sink. Deborah never said a word. Just watched me as I cried and walked away. Chloe crossed the room, placing a mug of tea into my shaking hands. "They lied to you, Natalie. All of them." I nodded. "Not just about the surgery. My entire life." My phone buzzed. An unknown number. One line. "They're starting to suspect you. Be careful." I showed it to Chloe. Her face tightened. "We're on borrowed time now." We fell into silence, interrupted only by the occasional flipping of paper. I picked up the birth certificate again, reading every line as if something would jump out and confess. I saw nothing. Just letters, false, precise, weaponized. Who fakes a child's identity? I whispered. The kind of people who need a scapegoat, Chloe replied. I looked at her. Vanessa. She nodded. If she was too sick to qualify and they needed a clean donor, they might have pulled you in quietly, unofficially. Created the paperwork to support it. I ran a hand through my hair. But why raise me at all? Chloe hesitated. A shield. If anyone looked too close, they'd see a daughter on paper. It would look normal. Just another family. A shield. A placeholder. A patch on the family's bleeding reputation. My mind flashed to every family photo where I stood off to the side. The school awards I mailed home that were never framed. The way Dad always smiled more when Vanessa entered the room. How Mom's eyes shifted when I asked about baby pictures, and she always said, "We didn't take many back then." Maybe there weren't any to take. I stood dizzy with rage and clarity. There's a donor recognition event at Riverford in September, right? Chloe looked up. Yeah. Their big PR campaign. Why? I walked to her laptop, pulled up the event page. Because I'm going. Natalie, I need to see them. On their turf, where they can't hide behind paper and lies. Chloe leaned forward. What are you planning? If they erased my past, I said, I'll expose their future. The registration form loaded slowly. I paused when it asked for name of attendee. I didn't type my real one. Instead, I typed Emily Carter. My grandmother's name. A ghost they wouldn't recognize. Then I hit submit. Chloe stood behind me, arms crossed. We need hard data. No more maybes. I nodded. We get the videos, the backups, whatever they erased. That's where Colin comes in. Enter Colin, her friend from law school turned cybersecurity analyst. Tall, awkward, always in a hoodie. He arrived with a beat-up backpack and a tired smile. So I'm breaking into a hospital's archival server. You're lucky I like Chloe. We're not asking you to break anything she corrected. Just restore what shouldn't have been deleted. Colin smirked. Potato. While he set up on the second desk, I stared at the door. I was waiting. At exactly 2:04 p.m. it opened. Tasha stepped in real this time. No chat window, no filtered audio. She wore a windbreaker and a baseball cap pulled low. Still, I recognized her from the 2017 photo. You okay being seen with us? Chloe asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. Tasha sat. No. But I'm more tired of running. I didn't speak. Just looked at her waiting. She reached into her bag and slid out a folder. Debra made me sign this in 2021. She said if I didn't rewrite the patient history, Vanessa would be disqualified. Then she said, if I refused, HR would find fentanyl vials in my locker. I opened the folder. Handwritten notes, familiar scrawls. Debra's handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, and now, falsified medical records. Chloe leaned in. We can use this. If we match it with internal access logs, I'm working on it. Colin muttered, his fingers flying. Riverford runs old hardware. Lots of redundancy. If they deleted something, odds are it still lives on a mirrored backup. I swallowed. Can you get into the transplant unit's backup server? Already trying. Their admin password was literally River1 in 23. God help us all. Tasha shifted. You don't get it. Debra wasn't just rewriting records. She was coordinating. Nurses, doctors, insurance reps. Everyone looked the other way because she knew how to make problems disappear. Like me, I said quietly. Everyone went still. Colin looked up. Got something? He projected a screen onto the wall. A log of system accesses, line after line of timestamps and file IDs. Chloe pointed. There, that one. A file tagged pre-trans-evil NJ04821. Colin opened it. A scanned document filled the screen, my pre-transplant evaluation. The name, Natalie Jane Moore. blood type B positive. But someone had drawn a faint, messy line through it. Below, new handwriting, AB negative per latest test. Chloe's voice sharpened. You're B positive, right? I nodded. That's not even remotely compatible. Colin scrolled down. The footer contained metadata. Backup override. Cleared by Chief Nurse Deborah Moore. My breath caught. Chloe's eyes narrowed. She didn't just participate. She orchestrated this. And in that moment, the fire I'd been building inside finally found its oxygen. Sometimes to shake the tree, you have to drop a single poisoned apple. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the draft. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. One more sentence, just one, and I'd cross a line no one could erase. I leaned back and reread the title, Consent or Coercion, a Case Study in Transplant Ethics. I had chosen every word carefully. No names, no direct accusations, just facts framed as questions: should hospital protocols allow family pressure to override informed consent, and, when documentation is inconsistent, who bears responsibility? It was written in the voice of a health policy blogger. I'd even set up a fake account, Heart of Ethics 84, linked to a VPN that bounced through 6 countries. You sure about this? Chloe asked, arms crossed. It's not just a blog post, it's bait. I clicked publish. Let's see who bites first. By noon the next day, the article had made its way to the inboxes of Riverford Hospital's administrators. Amanda Jensen, director of communications, forwarded it to Deborah with the subject line PR issue. The email thread that followed was brief but telling. Deborah, unsubstantiated. Possibly disgruntled ex-patient. Ignore for now. Amanda Legal wants a statement ready just in case. Deborah. No response. It'll blow over. But it didn't. That afternoon, the hospital scheduled a closed-door reputational risk review. Chloe, ever resourceful, had a friend in IT who owed her a favor. She got access to the meeting invite list and, better yet, a copy of the virtual call's audio. It was grainy, but one voice came through crystal clear, Deborah's. If we panic, we give it weight, she said. No one can prove anything. Yet. I paused the audio, playing that line again. Yet. That word crawled under my skin. Amanda's voice chimed in, nervous. Should we vet the piece? At least track the IP already requested, Deborah snapped. We need to know who wrote it. Immediately. Back at Chloe's apartment, we replayed the clip over and over. Tasha, sitting at the edge of the sofa, muttered. She's scared. Good, I said. Now we press harder. We hadn't even finished lunch when another message landed in our secure inbox. From unknown subject, 2019, blood match tampering. It was a scanned letter. No name. Just a line typed in courier font. I was told to adjust the blood type of a donor file in 2019. I said no. I was taken off the transplant rotation the next week. Below that, I'm willing to talk. But not in public. Chloe looked up. They're breaking ranks. We pinned the letter next to the others. The wall was beginning to look like the aftermath of an explosion, evidence scattered and connected by red string photos, arrows, timestamps. Our web was growing, but fire draws attention. That evening, Chloe's VPN flickered. She frowned, then checked her logs. Her face drained of color. What? I asked. They're trying to trace the blog post. Someone ran a trace on the Heart of Ethics account, multiple attempts, and one of the pings hit a cached credential from my work server. They're sniffing around. My stomach twisted. It's Deborah, Chloe said. She's tracking us. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel in control. I felt hunted. Truth has a smell. Once you catch a whiff, you can't forget it. The moment I stepped into Chloe's apartment, the stench of desperation, fear, and something more, something that clung to the underside of truth, hit me harder than the city's humidity. The whiteboard dominated the room, now dotted with color-coded notes, pinned affidavits, and a red thread that seemed to connect every lie back to one name: Deborah Moore. Chloe was already at work flipping through legal documents while Tasha adjusted a projector. The room was dim lit only by a small desk lamp and the dull glow of the rain through the windows. A folding chair scraped as I took my seat beside two strangers, Gabriel and Linda. They didn't look like revolutionaries. Gabriel, a quiet man in his late 40s, had tired eyes and the kind of stiffness that comes from years of holding things in. Linda looked brittle, as if she'd been held together by anger for too long. Silent consent, Chloe began, is what we're calling ourselves for now, but tonight we speak. I took a breath. I've charted all the transplants and medical gifts linked to Deborah Moore since 2015. Every single case involved a donor who either couldn't give informed consent or later claimed coercion. Tasha clicked the next slide, a grid of files and headshots. These are the volunteers, she said. Most are gone. Some we can't reach. But the pattern holds. Gabriel reached into a weathered briefcase and handed over a folded document. This is my will. The hospital convinced me to rewrite it before donating bone marrow. Said it was procedural, but the original had a clause about financial compensation. It's not in the new one. Chloe's eyes narrowed. That's illegal on so many levels. Linda finally spoke, her voice brittle but sharp. I was 17. They said I'd lose my scholarship if I didn't terminate. Deborah called it a necessary trade. I thought that's just how the world worked. The room went still. They picked people with no backup, she whispered. No one to fight for us. They called it sacrifice. But it was calculated. I felt the burn behind my eyes and looked away. Chloe tapped her pen. We need a legal trigger. A public request for hospital audit if they stonewall we go media. And if they don't? I asked. Then we force inconsistencies into the open. They can't hide if they have to answer. Tasha leaned forward. Deborah is the face, but she's not the only one. There are layers here. I nodded. Then we peel them back. One file at a time. We drafted the letter together, an official request for disclosure of transplant protocols and donor documentation. Chloe would file it through her firm, citing recent concerns over procedural anomalies. Gabriel added a final note. They made us think we were noble, but it was just leverage. As the group began to disperse, I stayed back, scanning the web of deceit we had mapped. I wasn't scared anymore, just sharpened. Then my phone rang. No contact. No caller ID. Just static. Then a voice. Male. Flat. If you keep pushing, someone's going to end up under the knife again. I didn't speak. The line cut. I thought I'd pulled the strings. But they'd been tightening a noose. For weeks, I believed I was gaining ground, gathering evidence, forming alliances, pulling back the curtains on the lies I'd been raised on. But as I stared at the chaos in Chloe's office that morning, files overturned, drawers yanked out, hard drives missing, I realized something sickening they had known. They'd always known. Chloe stood by the window, her hands clenched into fists, trying to breathe through the whirlwind. Two men from the regulatory board had just left. They'd arrived unannounced, flashing badges and citing data privacy violations. It was a raid masked as procedure, a warning wrapped in bureaucracy. I didn't even touch patient records outside what you gave me, she said, her voice trembling. This is retaliation. Deborah's trying to break us down piece by piece. My phone vibrated. An email. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. You really should stop digging before someone gets hurt. Maybe your little friend with the law degree. Chloe read it over my shoulder, her face blanching. They're watching us, she whispered. That night, my laptop wouldn't turn on. I tried every trick, every backup. The encryption was gone. In its place, a blinking red error screen. All the files I'd collected, test results, audio recordings, correspondence with Tasha, obliterated. My heart sank deeper than fear. It twisted into something colder, emptier. Then came the press leak. A blog post published under a fake name but clearly coordinated unstable woman fakes medical scandal to harm respected hospital. The story was riddled with fabrications. Natalie Moore emotionally disturbed, retaliating after being denied attention. Deborah wasn't named, but her fingerprints were everywhere. And somehow they'd included a photo of me from years ago, eyes red from crying. My inbox exploded. Former classmates, distant relatives, colleagues who never asked about my recovery, all of them now suddenly concerned, pitying, or worse, accusing. Deborah had always known how to wield perception like a scalpel. I wanted to disappear. For the first time in this whole war, I truly wanted to vanish. Chloe made tea, sat beside me on the worn couch. Her hand found mine. "You can stop," she said quietly. "We've done more than most would dare, but if you stop now, they'll do it to someone else. Someone weaker. Someone who won't have a Chloe." I looked up at her. Something settled behind my ribs, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I nodded. We went to her storage locker that night, a dusty unit filled with boxes from law school and old tech. In a plastic bin marked Junk 2018, she found it my original portable drive, the one I'd used before switching laptops. It powered on with a slow hum. I clicked through folders, hands shaking. Most were dead ends. Photos, music drafts of old essays. But buried in a folder labeled Temp, I found it the backup audio file. Chloe and I locked eyes as we hit play. It was grainy. The static cracked over the voices, but there was no mistaking them. "You'll delete the original test results," Deborah's voice snapped. "And what if she finds out?" Another voice, nervous, unfamiliar, replied. "She won't. She's too grateful to ask questions. Besides, she'll never know. She's not even mine." The silence afterward was louder than the recording itself. "She'll never know. She's not even mine." I didn't remember breathing, didn't remember blinking. My mind was frozen, replaying the sentence over and over. Everything that had ever happened, Deborah's coldness, her cruelty, her control. It all clicked into place like a twisted puzzle piece. She wasn't just lying to the world. She had lied to me about who I was, about what I was. My world shifted on its axis. I wasn't just their scapegoat. I was never truly their daughter. There was always a missing piece. Now I held it in my shaking hands. It was almost midnight when Chloe finally fell asleep on the couch, her laptop still humming beside her. The soft glow from the monitor bathed her face in blue shadows, her breath steady, shoulders slack for the first time in days. I stayed in the kitchen, hunched over the dining table where Colin's latest delivery sat like a ticking bomb, the decrypted backup drive. It had taken him 4 days. A maze of hospital encryption, administrative logins, and redundant file names, every barrier Deborah thought would buy her silence. But Colin was better. And now, all those locked rooms were open. I clicked on the folder labeled Core. Inside, scanned PDFs, email chains, biometric files. I scrolled until I saw it, the full DNA report. Not just the liver match, the marrow match, the parentage match. The one test Chloe had insisted we needed. I opened it, and there it was, a complete mismatch. 0% compatibility with Deborah Moore. 0% with Merrick Moore. My hands trembled. Not because it confirmed what I feared, but because it confirmed what I felt. For years, I thought the distance between us was my fault, that I had failed at being their daughter. Now I knew I had never been one to begin with. And yet, they took my body. I exhaled slowly, as if releasing 30 years of breath I never had the right to claim. The second file was a birth certificate, or rather, a forged one. Colin had highlighted inconsistencies, a typeface not used until 2009, a missing registry code, and most damning, a digital watermark indicating it had been reissued in 2021, 2 years ago. Someone had tried to erase me, not just from the present, from the past. I click next. An audio file. Deborah's voice again. You think she's going to grow up grateful, a bitter laugh. She was never ours. Just insurance. A failsafe. My chest went hollow. There was more emails between Deborah and hospital executives, subtly referring to at-risk minors, bio-leverage, and closed-loop donors. Chloe had mentioned once jokingly that Deborah could sell snow to a snowman. Now I knew she sold people. I couldn't cry. There was no grief left for her. Only clarity. And rage refined into steel. I created a new folder. Labeled it Truth. I uploaded every file, audio, DNA reports, forged documents, and encrypted it again, this time with Chloe's legal team's key. Then I emailed it to 3 addresses, one journalist in Chicago, one in DC, and one at a watchdog group called Medical Rights United. Each received the same message: I am Natalie Moore. I was never a match. I was never their daughter, but I was their victim. Attached is everything you need. I hit send. Then I turned to the last piece. A registration form for the hospital's organ donor commemoration gala. September 17th, 2023. I had already missed the early deadline, but that didn't matter. This year's theme, legacy through sacrifice. The irony made my skin itch. I filled in the form under a different name. One I'd seen in a discarded file Deborah once misfiled long ago. Emily Lynn. It was the name written on the intake form of a baby transferred to Riverford in 1994. Same date of birth as mine. Different mother. No discharge record. I clicked submit. I looked around Chloe's apartment, dim and quiet. Somewhere behind me she stirred but didn't wake. Outside the street was still. But I could feel it, something shifting. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was war. They built an empire on silence. I arrived with the megaphone. The marble floors of Riverford's grand atrium shimmered under the camera lights. People gathered like moths drawn to a flame, all smiles, applause, and cheap champagne. The banners read, Celebrating Sacrifice, Annual Donor Legacy Gala. I clenched the visitor's badge clipped to my jacket, Emily Lynn. No one blinked twice. I spotted Chloe near the back, blending into the crowd in a beige trench coat and oversized glasses. Her eyes met mine briefly, and she nodded. The tablet in her hand was already unlocked, video loaded, connection tested. The stage was dressed in self-congratulation. Vanessa stood front and center, hair in perfect waves, makeup flawless, and a fabricated humility painted across her face. A giant projection behind her displayed a slideshow, childhood photos, hospital beds, and finally the moment I remembered too well, me wheeled away, drugged into the OR. They'd cropped my face out. Amanda, the hospital's PR director, took the podium. Tonight, we honor a story of love, resilience, and family. Vanessa Moore is not just a survivor, she's a symbol. Applause erupted. I stayed still. My palms were slick. But I wasn't nervous. I was coiled. Deborah stepped forward next. She wore deep navy and a smile sharpened with lies. Sacrifice, she began, is the highest form of love. When you give of yourself not out of obligation but of choice, you elevate humanity. I stepped into the aisle. One by one, I handed folded pamphlets to guests. On the cover, was it a gift or a theft inside, was a QR code. Every file, every report, every forged record. Some guests began scanning. On stage, Deborah continued. And as a mother, the screen behind her flickered. Vanessa froze. The slideshow stuttered, then disappeared. In its place, security footage. Deborah, in her office, eyes sharp, voice low. Delete the match report. If she ever finds out, we're all screwed. Gasps, murmurs. Next, an audio clip, Deborah whispering to Vanessa in a stairwell. She's not even ours. Just insurance. You know that. Vanessa turned to her mother, confusion blooming into panic. Turn it off, she hissed. Shut her up. Deborah snapped to Amanda, who was already motioning frantically to the tech crew, but Chloe had locked the stream into every active screen. Vanessa's voice cracked. What is this? I took the final steps toward the stage, each one heavy and deliberate. The crowd parted around me. Some clutched their phones. Some filmed. Deborah's face drained of color, and I spoke clear, steady. My name is Natalie Lynn, and I was never your daughter. You can fake paperwork, but blood always speaks the truth. The hospital's emergency conference room reeked of sweat and stale coffee. Less than an hour ago, this place was silent. Now it pulsed with chaos, press badges, clicking cameras, muffled shouts into phones. A hastily printed sign read, "Crisis briefing, authorized staff only," but no one obeyed it. The door had been thrown open and the public came pouring in. I stood near the long table, a folder in my hand. It was trembling, but not from fear. Deborah sat at the far end, flanked by the hospital's legal counsel and the director of operations. Her lips were pressed into a bloodless line. Vanessa was on her left, mascara smudged pupils dilated with disbelief. Chloe set up her laptop near the screen. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. The USB drive she held contained everything, years of lies compressed into a single truth. I stepped forward. This, I said. Raising the folder is a certified genetic profile, issued independently by 3 labs. I am not biologically related to Deborah or Merrick Moore. Gasps echoed. Some reporters shouted. Deborah opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. And this, I handed Chloe the drive, is the medical report that shows my liver was never a viable match for Vanessa. Not naturally, which means the surgery was performed under a falsified profile. Chloe clicked, and the screen displayed the overlay: Vanessa's blood type versus mine. A mismatch. This isn't just fraud, Chloe said clearly. This is medical assault. Vanessa shot up. She's lying. She always wanted attention, but the room wasn't listening to her anymore. Tasha stepped forward. Her hospital ID still hung from her neck, even though she hadn't used it in years. I was asked, no, ordered to alter donor compatibility reports, she said. Her voice was steady, louder than I'd expected. In 2022, I flagged inconsistencies. Deborah told me, and I quote, "Do it, or I'll make sure you never work in healthcare again." So I did, but I kept copies. She pulled out a small envelope and handed it to the director. Gasps again. A man in a suit leaned into the mic. On behalf of the hospital board, effective immediately, Deborah Moore is suspended pending investigation. A multi-agency task force will be initiated. Vanessa looked like she might faint. Deborah didn't move. She just turned slowly toward me. You think this is justice? She whispered. Her voice cracked. You were never meant to survive. 2 security guards flanked her. She didn't resist as they led her out. Her shoes clicked against the tile, echoing louder than any applause. I stood there, the room spinning, flashbulbs popping, questions flying. But all I could hear was that last sentence. You were never meant to survive. And yet here I was. When a monster falls, its ruins crush more than just itself. It had been 7 days since the fallout. 7 days since I said my name aloud and watched my former mother's mask crack under the heat of truth. Now I sat curled on the corner of Chloe's worn-out sofa, the morning light barely cutting through the thick curtains she'd drawn shut for me. The world outside buzzed with noise, interviews, headlines, think pieces, but in here, silence hung like dust. My phone had 27 missed calls. I hadn't returned one. Chloe entered carrying a tray with tea and a stack of legal envelopes. Her eyes were tired, but she still smiled the way only someone who's seen your worst and stayed could. They're calling it the Riverford Redemption case now, she said, setting down the tray. The Department of Health's launching a full-scale audit on transplant procedures going back a decade. I stared at the screen where a breaking news banner ran beneath a shot of the hospital. Deborah Moore officially indicted on 5 federal counts: medical fraud, evidence tampering, abuse of authority. Gabriel's face appeared next, giving a statement outside the courthouse. His voice trembled, but he stood tall. She told me I could save my sister, he said. But she didn't tell me I'd never walk properly again. Chloe sat beside me. He's joining the class action. So is Linda. I nodded numb. My eyes drifted to my own name in a legal document she handed over. Lead testimonial. Natalie Lynn, aka Emily Lynn. I'm tired, Chloe. I know. We didn't say much for a while. I let the tea go cold. Later that night, Colin stopped by. He brought Thai food and a drive full of recovered files from the hospital server. This, he said, handing it to Chloe, includes the full communication log between Deborah and the insurance providers. She diverted claims to fake accounts. I should have felt triumph. But all I felt was hollow. The cost of truth wasn't just her reputation, it was years I'd never get back, scars stitched over my memories. The knowledge that every act of affection had been transactional. Vanessa had been readmitted to the hospital 3 days ago, complications from the transplant. I hadn't visited. Word was her insurance had been frozen. No visitors, no flowers. Do you want to go see her? Chloe asked once. No, I said too quickly. At midnight, I couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet except for the fridge humming. I opened my laptop. Inbox 3894 unread. One caught my eye. Subject: I knew the truth all along. Sender: Deborah Moore. Hospital 1 securemail.gov. Dated February 2023, a month before the surgery. I hovered. Then clicked. Natalie. You were never meant to find this. But part of me always knew one day you might remember. Might ask. I didn't choose you, but I protected you in my own way. When the truth comes, remember, I gave you life. In more ways than one. I read it 3 times. Then I shut the laptop. They erased me to protect themselves. Now I had to learn who I truly was. The building was older than I'd imagined. Peeling linoleum floors yellowed fluorescent lights, and the faint scent of aging paper filled the Office of Adoption Records in downtown Chicago. I stood in front of the receptionist's window, holding my ID with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. I'm here to request access to sealed documents. I said, my voice just above a whisper. Natalie Lynn. I was adopted. The woman behind the glass, mid-50s with a tired smile, nodded like she'd seen 1,000 versions of me before. You'll need to fill this out, she said, sliding a clipboard toward me. Chloe sat beside me as I scribbled my information. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was its own language, one of patience, of witnessing. An hour later, we were led into a cramped room lined with metal filing cabinets. The clerk returned with a worn folder marked in faded ink, Lynn Natalie, Adoption Record 1994. I opened it slowly like I was unwrapping the last box in Pandora's attic. There she was, Elizabeth Monroe, registered nurse, deceased 1996. Cause of death: car accident on Route 41. No known family, no father listed. A note clipped to the side, child placed in emergency custody. Referred to Moore family, Riverford County. Approved by expedited process, no known objections. No objections, I wasn't even old enough to speak. The clerk stepped out. Chloe stayed. There were more documents. Letters, some typed, others in careful handwriting. One addressed to the future Natalie, unsigned, unsent. I wasn't meant to be a mother, but I was meant to protect you. If you're reading this, maybe I failed. Or maybe this is me trying not to. I didn't know if it came from Elizabeth or Deborah. Either way, it landed in the same hollow place inside me. I spent my whole life being someone else's version of who I should be, I murmured. Chloe's voice was gentle. And now I don't know who I am. But at least now the lies aren't in the way. We left the office with copies of the originals. That night, I laid everything on Chloe's living room floor: false birth certificates, forged medical waivers, hospital records stained with ink and manipulation. One by one, I fed them into a ceramic bowl and lit a match. The pages curled and blackened. I watched every lie burn until all that remained was ash and the genetic report that told me who I wasn't. I kept that one. Just one. The next morning, an email waited in my inbox. Dear Ms. Lynn, in light of your recent testimony and the national attention your story has garnered, we would be honored to invite you as a guest speaker at the upcoming congressional hearing on ethical reform in organ donation protocols. I stared at the screen, my reflection caught in the dark glass. A stranger still, but no longer silent. They gave me a body, but now I had a voice. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Maybe it was the polished marble floors or the rows of cameras trained on me like silent judges. Or maybe it was just the memory of everything they tried to erase. I adjusted the microphone, felt the tremor in my fingers, and looked out at the sea of unfamiliar faces. Chloe gave me a small nod from her seat. Tasha sat beside her, hands clasped. Gabriel and Linda had taken the front row. The name tag pinned to my jacket didn't say Natalie Lynn. It said, Witness Independent Advocate for Medical Ethics, a title I earned, not one assigned by those who saw me as disposable. I cleared my throat. I'm not here to relive trauma. I'm here to prevent it from happening again. A hush fell across the room. For 29 years, I believed I was part of a family. I gave everything for that illusion, my trust, my silence, and recently part of my liver. What I didn't know was that I was never their daughter. I was a contingency plan, a name on paper, a match on blood tests, carefully forged. The display behind me lit up with a slide, Deborah's signature juxtaposed with the altered medical forms. Chloe advanced the slides, methodical and calm. They told me family meant sacrifice, but what they meant was obedience. What they meant was, your body belongs to us. A ripple moved through the gallery, reporters shifting pens poised. Flashbulbs blinked. I continued. I'm not the only one. Gabriel was promised a scholarship if he donated bone marrow. Linda was told her abortion would stay secret if she didn't ask questions. There are more. Dozens, maybe hundreds. My voice steadied. This isn't about revenge. This is about recognition, about ensuring that no one is ever asked to sacrifice under coercion again. The legislative aide to the chairman whispered something into his ear. He looked down, then back at me. Miss Lynn, Natalie, I said. Just Natalie. He nodded. Natalie, what would you propose? I glanced once more at Chloe. Her eyes held a mix of pride and sorrow. I turned back to the microphone. Transparency, independent ethics boards, mandatory psychological evaluation for all family-based donations, auditable consent logs, and most importantly, accountability when those systems fail. There was a beat of silence. Then the first person stood. Applause started, hesitant, unsure. Then it spread. Tasha stood. Linda followed. Chloe wiped her eyes and joined them. By the time the chairman banged the gavel, nearly the entire room was on their feet. As the hearing adjourned, I stepped into the hallway. For the first time, I didn't feel like a shadow. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I think I knew your mother. Can we talk, Jay? I stared at the screen. They took my name, my blood, my body, but not my will. Even empires built on silence can crumble with a single voice. Natalie's journey didn't start with strength. It began with betrayal, but it ended with justice delivered not in whispers but in headlines. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is believe you're powerless. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. She was never their daughter, but in the end, she was the truth they couldn't bury. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like, share, and comment your thoughts on this story. Type 1 if you felt seen. Type 2 if you think justice still has more work to do.